Okay, so super excited to kick off this topic. I've been talking about this topic for a little while now, and I'm elated really to have two of my favorite people on healing relationship patterns. If it's your first time with us, my name is Janet Pope, and this is The Good Lounge. The Good Lounge is a nonprofit that I started focused on sustainable well-being for women, Black, and queer communities. What do I mean when I say sustainable well-being? I'm talking about making sure that we have all the right tools related to financial, emotional, and physical well-being, because I believe that balance is what you need to be enabled to live your best life. So continuing to deliver edutainment like this wonderful session that we're on today, and also partner to just provide access to, again, resources and tools and build community. So again, excited about this topic, healing relationship patterns. Let me just give my disclaimer. It's 2026. I don't know when you may find this topic in this webinar, but let me give my disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in this webinar are those of the individual speakers and do not reflect the official position of any company, organization, employer, or other agency for which they may have and do have an affiliation. The content is intended for informational and edutainment purposes only. Okay, that's out the way. Now, let's dig in. Again, you're here on the topic of healing relationship patterns. We'll talk about boundaries. We'll talk about navigating conflict. We'll talk about people pleasing. We'll talk about this in the aspect of how it may show up for you in romantic relationships, in friendships, with family, at work, because we're recognizing that something that you do in one relationship probably is making its way into other relationships. And most importantly, we want to make sure you have tips and things to do to break out of those patterns, to end those cycles, to, again, just being able to live your best life. Now you're wondering about these wonderful women that are on this webinar with me, I'm sure. So let me first turn it over to Hazel to give an introduction.
Yes, I'm Hazel Monae, twice on Sunday. That's what they say. I would be remiss if I did not bring into the space Dorothy, who I lovingly call Gma, who passed in December. I think she deeply has always informed how I show up in the world, but even more so now, and is one of the richest relationships I've ever had. So I just want to start there. I am California, Nevada native, finding home in the East Coast, currently in DMV. I'm the kind of architect behind the Rushing to Adulthood platform, which we'll hear a little bit more about. Really thinking about community, story, history, love, and connection as a way to heal in this adult life. And so I'm really excited about this topic. I work in the intersections of ethical leadership, government, and equity. So I'm really excited to bring all those pieces here to the conversation.
Awesome. Happy to have you, Hazel. And Tamara, over to you.
Thank you. My name is Tamara Jones, and I am Louisiana born and Houston raised, and I just love dealing with, I specialize in relational aspects because I think that is an important dynamic that affects all parts of our lives, whether professional, personal, all those aspects. I don't care where we go. We find ourselves in some type of relation with others. And sometimes we try to downplay some things and keep it moving as if all is okay. But if we don't take time to really understand how we're showing up in those relationships, it can definitely have an impact on how we feel about ourselves. So very family oriented, love my friendships and sisterhood, all those types of things. And so I just love being able to come into this forum and talk about this topic so that other people can benefit and grow and show up their healthiest form of themselves in their relationship dynamic.
Absolutely. Okay. So as I was saying earlier, just to tee this up, we often notice that we end up in similar situations with different people at home, at work, in our friendships. When I asked you to join a conversation today on healing relationship patterns, what is the first thing that maybe came to mind for you when I said relationship patterns? And what is something that, if we don't discuss anything else today, you want to make sure we talk about? I'd also invite people in the chat to share some things that they came to the conversation that they want to make sure we unpack when we talk about relationship patterns. We'll start with you, Tam.
So for me, I think about, how do we view ourselves, right? Because oftentimes how we view ourselves is how we think everybody else is thinking about us, and sometimes we like to be bigger than life itself, and we make every interaction about us. And so oftentimes that can play a factor in relationships, right? And so sometimes we're writing our own narratives without checking in to see what's actually going on. And so we're just operating off of stuff that we have going on in our head. So just really just making sure like how your self-worth shows up and how you show up and how you view others, right? Because if you are constantly, how do you judge, right? Do you show up judging others? If that's the case, you're often thinking that other people are judging you. So those are some aspects that have a heavy impact on relationships. And so it plays out in various ways. So I'm excited to just kind of dig into that a little bit later throughout today's discussion.
That's a really good point. And if you're judging yourself harshly, you're probably judging others harshly, etc. Yeah, good. Okay. Hazel, what about you?
Wow, that's good, Tamara, because I'm a Virgo, and that once didn't mean much to me, but the more I sort of expand that, I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of judgment there, but often it's just me judging me. So if you have been at the receiving end of my judgment, I'm so sorry. So I speak a lot in metaphors. I really like to find connection in real life to some of these concepts. And so when I was thinking about this conversation around relationship patterns, I was thinking about kind of a neighborhood made up of, what do they call, like stock houses? They're not like, I forget the name of them. But they're production homes, that's what they're called, where, you sort of say, hey, I want to build, but the developer sort of already has selected, like, these are your, few blueprints. And really what your goal is to sort of like say, here's what I want my light fixtures or the doorknobs or things like that. Right. And so if I think about like the relationship pattern sort of concept, I think about the actual production home or itself being kind of the bones or the container that sets the precedent for whatever that relationship pattern is. And then the light fixtures and the knobs is just sort of the intricate ways it might show up in different relationships. But when you look at the entire neighborhood, right, you're pretty much going to see roughly the same design, and it's just going to have maybe a different color door or what have you. And so I really think about how the pattern itself manifests in different contexts. And so for the other thing for me is when I talk about a lot of what my work is around the gerund. I love that this is about healing, that it's ongoing, even though we're here speaking about it, like I can tell you 10 ways that I am still learning a lot of what I'm going to be talking about. And I'm sure that's true for my friends here on the call with me. And so just the gift of being able to keep growing and to keep shifting. And I'll actually talk a little bit about my own understanding of how those patterns can shift over our lives based on the context and the relationships that we have.
Yeah, I love that. In the context of a journey and not a destination, and something that you just come to based on reading one book or going to one webinar, having a couple of therapy sessions, but that it is something that is an ongoing part of our growth. Thanks for that. Okay, one of my favorite topics over the last 5 years, maybe I'll say, I fooled around and read the book Attached. And maybe also around the same time, the internet also got a little obsessed with attachment styles, and I got sucked right on into that. So let's talk about attachment styles and the fact that when we usually hear or talk about attachment styles, it's in the context of romantic relationships. But, whether you're secure or you're anxious or avoidant or disorganized, that's the attachment style that doesn't really get talked about as often, but it exists and is like a combination of things. All of that and how you show up is really rooted in your early dynamic with your caregivers. So talk a little bit about how these patterns play out differently with friends and family and potentially at work. And maybe more importantly, the everyday cues that would help us recognize that, okay, I'm falling into, or maybe falling is not in the right word, but I'm observing a pattern in myself. We'll start with Tamara.
I think it's just based off of how you deal with conflict, right? So are you one to run away from conflict? Are you one to people please so we don't have to deal with conflict at all? Do you shut down and avoid dealing with it? Or are you one who chases to kind of just talk about everything, right? And so oftentimes we think we are handling things, people pleasing. It's like, okay, at all costs, I'm just going to keep the peace, but not recognizing if you're not checking in and checking on your own needs, you're destroying your own peace. And so that can create an unhealthy dynamic in a relationship pattern. But that anxiousness, right, we're just doing all things because we feel like the moment someone is upset with us, it's the end of the world. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, is like, how do we view ourselves? Because we go through life, navigating life, people are going to be upset. You're going to have, encounter misunderstandings. And that's just being real with people. We can keep it surface level and everything is always cordial. But when you're being real with people, you're going to come into disagreements and misunderstandings, and that's okay. But just being able to check your patterns to see, okay, are you shutting down every time something happens because you just can't regulate yourself and you think that you're going to blow up, or do you self-sabotage because you anticipate somebody is about to reject you, so you're going to beat this person to the punch? So those are dynamics that not even just the romantic, the intimate relationships, but those friendships, the family dynamics, it plays out in all these things. And then it follows us into the professional dynamic. And that's a very interesting space, because now you're looking at everybody, I often hear a lot of people like, everybody's out to get me, or everybody's against me. And again, not recognizing everything is not all about you. If you can recognize that everybody is dealing with their own life and all the challenges or the aspects about that, we could give people grace and space to deal with their own stuff and just show up with curiosity versus internalizing everything. So those attachment styles, they're good to be informative about letting us know about ourselves and what to address. But I think some people are like, oh, yes, I'm an anxious attachment, or I'm an avoidant attachment, and that's just how I show up. No, the goal isn't not to just hold on to this or justify that these are the qualities or these are your behaviors. It's figuring out, how do you work towards the secure attachment? That should be the goal. Not just, oh yeah, that's my anxious attachment, so I'm just going to do that so that my partner or my friends, they should just deal with that because that's just who I am. We should always, like Hazel had mentioned earlier, we should always be seeking to grow. It's a continuous journey. And so you can't say you went to therapy 4 years ago and you've done your healing and now everything's perfect. We should always be evolving. We keep going through different phases of life, different circumstances, and that affects us differently. And so we should always be in tune. Are we regressing into certain old patterns, or are we constantly putting our best foot forward and trying to make sure that we are dealing with things that are based off of current content and not based off of our baggage from our past experiences?
Yeah, I love what you're sharing there. And I'm also hearing, like, I've heard people, oh, I'm this insert zodiac sign, and so you just going to have to deal with it. And I like how you're calling us out to say this isn't the way on any of these things. So good call outs there. Hazel, what would you like to add?
Yeah, so much. I'm just echo a lot of what Tamara said about just the continual shift. I sort of thought about this from a specific vantage point. So couple years back now, I read this book called Mother Hunger by Kelly McDaniel. The entire title is Mother Hunger: How Adult Daughters Can Understand and Heal from Lost Nurturance, Protection, and Guidance. And I read it because I became a stepmother and I wanted to be able to offer something, right? Something beyond maybe what I had at the moment. And it was interesting because the book itself was not so much about how to be a mother. It was more so how to be a daughter, like how to be the daughter, given all of the things. And shout out to my mother, B. Johnson, I lovingly call her, who is actually watching. And we talk a lot about our journey and where, as you mentioned, Janet, a lot of our attachment styles start in, our familial or those who are our guardians and parents. And so just given the childhood and the challenges that my parents faced, which then, of course, as a child, I faced as a residual, I would historically be categorized as a disorganized or fearful attachment. It's like I really want emotional closeness. I really want to, connect, but there's this fear, kind of what you said, Tamara, around like, I want to get you before you get me. And so it's like, I'm going to pull away. I don't want to be hurt, and I don't necessarily trust you, but I want to. And some of that, as others who are listening might be familiar with, and those who who were sort of set to steward you or dealing with their own challenges and can't always give you what you need. My first learning was that, like, you just can't trust people. You got to do it yourself. But that's not, for me, that was not natural. Like, I naturally wanted to lean in. I naturally wanted to connect with my peers, with my mentors. Mentors are on the call as well. Shout out to them. And so part of the way that I've been able to kind of move forward in life was through some of those relationships, including the ones where the original site was a little bit of pain. So being able to talk with my mother, with my siblings about the challenges and how we get along in this kind of era of our lives has actually allowed me to shift into other spaces where I do feel like I have a little bit more secure attachment style. And actually, friends and mentors have been the space where they've really poured into me and then let me know, like, hey, how you're showing up it's not it, and I love you enough to invite you somewhere else. And so working in my romantic relationships, my friendships, my mentorships, really helped me think about, like, as someone who, as a young person, really loved being rewarded for my behavior, about how good I was and how lovable I was. It really helped me shift to think about, like, okay, I want to be rewarded for, like, being myself or being more grounded. And then I'm able to move away from wanting to be rewarded altogether, which is a treat. And so for cues, I think as we're all thinking about what does it look like, I believe we come to know ourselves deeper in relationship to others, period. I could not be who I am without all the people, everyone, regardless of who you are, what kind of experience we've had, for good or for ill, and everything in between. We are who we are because of, and sometimes in spite of, the things we've experienced, the people that we've been around. And so there are some patterns that I could have never recognized without them, right? So being able to ask myself, can I wait? Can I live with uncertainty for a short amount of time? Can I receive feedback that isn't just, hey, you're so great? As a kid, I received feedback a lot that, oh, you're so wise beyond your years. You're so smart. You're so this. And I began to sort of form my identity around being praised. And then it was like, well, I love people who give me feedback. Shout out to a couple of my friends, some of who are watching, who drag me way more often than I'd like. But I really appreciate that, right? Like, can I receive that feedback and understand the heart it comes from? Can I receive support as someone who, again, learned to ride or die for myself? I can stand on 10 toes down by myself. It's a lonely road, and I do not recommend. And so being able to trust people to support me. And then the last thing for a cue that I've been learning a lot, particularly in some of my more intimate friendships and in my marriage, is like, how do I leave? How do I leave a room? How do I leave a job? How do I leave a relationship? Like, I'm not leaving my relationship. That was terrible context. But like when things, stuff get crazy, I'll be like, you can't just like run away when there's a challenge. You can't just run away when this person gives you feedback that you hurt them or whatever it might be. Can I stay? And can I be uncomfortable enough? Can I trust the relationship? And in those experiences, I've been able to shift, I believe, my attachment style, year over year. There's, Lord's still working on me, but it's better.
So wait, there were so many nuggets
I
in
know,
there.
I said so many things. I'll be talking.
No, you're doing this. I'm loving this. Can you just recap them? Because I want to make sure we didn't miss
the cues.
The nuggets. Yes, the cues.
Oh, yeah. Can you wait? Can you live with uncertainty even for a short amount of time? Can you receive feedback? Can you let people help you? And how do you leave a room, a job, a relationship, whatever it might be? Those are the kind of questions that I ask myself if I'm feeling, to try to be more reflective about what's happening if I feel a little bit of anxiety in that relationship.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to tap and is this thing on a couple of those points because they deeply resonated with me. So
can I add to that?
Absolutely.
Which I think it's also important to recognize. It goes back to dealing with conflict, right? How do you view it? Is it something that you have to avoid because you've only associated with something that's terrible, or can you go into it knowing that it's leading to a deeper understanding of who you're dealing with, right? Because if you go from that space, you find out that there's nothing that you have to be scared of. Sometimes we can get so worked up because we are anticipating the worst case scenario and we're trying to avoid that at all costs and not recognizing that very behavior is doing the damage that we're trying to avoid, right? And so oftentimes, how do you deal with the space? Right? So do you think just because someone is taking space from you to go deal with whatever they have going on, or even to process, to be able to come back to the conversation, do you think that they're about to leave you? That abandonment. That, some people struggle with, that codependency, because you can love something so much that you choke the life out of it if you don't give it space to breathe. Do you give yourself space to understand how you're dealing with a situation, or how much you can appreciate who you're dealing with? But, that anxiousness will have you okay, I in your absence, I'm all consumed. My thoughts are consumed about what you have going on. Don't lose your identity. So much you hear about people, I lost myself in this marriage. I lost myself in this friendship. And that's that people pleasing, right? We're only concerned about what the other person has going on, that we don't check in with ourselves. So it's important, regardless of what relationship dynamic you find yourself in, it's important to have your own personal space to have your creative space, your release, whatever it is, to connect with yourself, to really be able to articulate your needs so that you are maintaining good relationships. Because oftentimes when we don't check in with ourselves, you have a whole lot of people who are avoidant of their emotions.
Absolutely.
And I recognize that the emotions play a factor in how we navigate life. But if we're trying to avoid them just because they're uncomfortable, you can't even articulate what's going on because you haven't checked in with yourself. And you have all these expectations of what you want your partner to do, what you won't do for yourself. Right. And so it's how do you hold someone accountable or put all this pressure on somebody to fill a void that you won't even feel? Our responsibility is with ourselves. Having the best relationship with yourself will be a really healthy relationship with others. But if you're not spending time taking care of yourself, you're going to find yourself in the same patterns in every relationship across the board. And then you're wondering, what's wrong with me? Well, if you just check in with yourself, it doesn't have to be anything wrong with you. It's just trying to understand yourself better.
Okay. And now you're preaching.
I want to. Oh my God.
Because you can't, if you're finding yourself in the same relationship with different people, maybe it's time to turn on that Michael Jackson song and look in the mirror.
Absolutely.
Ooh, drag yourself. I want to say, because I've said this to a couple of friends, this also very much applies in the workspace. I have been ridiculously, I will say fortunate, blessed, but I also have worked really hard to be someone who shows up into interviews. I'm interviewing you too. I appreciate what you're offering as an organization, but I'm the prize. And I recognize that. Again, shout out to G-Ma. She used to tell her siblings, I'm the star of every show. And she meant it in a different way than I mean it. I mean it very humbly, but I'm the star of my life. And so if I'm going to give you my majority of our time is spent at these jobs, up at these people's office, my God. And so I need to enter into that space with my power intact. These are the gifts that I bring to this space. And if I hear something in here that, brings up this like, I'm uncomfortable, like go after that. I think what you're saying is like we have lost the sense to intuit and to trust ourselves, specifically as women and Black women. We have to get back to trusting ourselves. I've been doing a lot of work just to like even small things like, hey, you need to relieve yourself. Do it now. Don't wait till you get a bladder infection, right? And so being able to listen to those small cues, even within ourselves, that says, hey, just ask it a second question, or, trust your gut on this. And it applies to the workspace. I will take that to the next degree, but I'll let it ride.
No, you're absolutely right. And I want to pull on two threads here before I move on to a different topic. So one was your point earlier, Hazel, on in real life, and how to not intellectualize or have all this theory about how you're going to do this and do that. And then you're actually in front of real people or you don't even want to be in front of real people. You're not doing anything in real life to know if any of that stuff is working for you. That was a point that you were making earlier that, it's so important, because people will get in therapy and talk things out, but then not do anything in real life, or will feel like they're healed and ready for whatever, but aren't, as soon as a challenge comes up with the real human, it's like, I'm out. And it's sort of like, well, actually, you don't actually know if you're growing, if you're healing, if you've improved on this thing, to your earlier point, until you're in relationship with another human being and testing those things out. So I definitely wanted to just pull on that thread, underscore that point. I do want to talk a little bit more too about, Tamara, you were starting to get into it, the difference between codependency, hyper independent, and interdependency. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, that codependency is like you just feel like you just have to be attached to someone else at all times, right? You're not able to function without somebody. Then just being that, like you said, that hyper independence, I don't need anybody else. Like you don't depend on, and not really recognizing where that's coming from. Some people see it as a flex. Right? Like, I don't need anybody. I can do it all by myself. Yes, you can, but do you have to? Like, you get exhausted at some point, because we all go through our seasons where we may be dealing with certain challenges. So you can't show up with all of your strength at all times, right? And so when you're entering those seasons, what do you do all by yourself? Are you over there sinking into depression because nobody is around, because you have presented this persona or this image that you got it all together? I remember there's been, maybe it's still going around, like, check on your strong friends. No, strong friends need to have the responsibility to communicate, hey, I'm suffering, I need help, right? It doesn't indicate a weakness. It means that you're human, right? Because especially as a Black community, we are community people, right? So we need the village. You always talk about it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village for us to just thrive, because there are certain things that you may have that benefit the community, and it may be other things that other people bring to the table. And when we all learn to give and take from each other, we all thrive. But if we're only worried about ourselves, there's this imbalance, right? And then there's the interdependence. It's like we are, like I was just talking about, just being able to depend on each other, defer to each other's strengths. Right. And so not looking at it, needing others, it doesn't make us less than or inadequate, but everything requires balance. When you're operating off of this codependency or this interdependence, both opposite ends of the spectrum, it's not a healthy space to be in. We need to find, our way into the middle. But unfortunately, everybody is trying to overcompensate for probably what they received as a child. What they may have experienced. And leading in, I know you're about to touch this, but I can't not get to it. But, you talk about these people who have these strict programs, right? And sometimes people confuse boundaries with rules. Rules, that's for you to govern your own life, right? Nobody should be making rules for everybody else. I can't tell you how irritating it is. It's like, okay, Black people, we should be doing this, or we should be doing this as this sector. Or who told you that we're not a monolith, right? And so everybody has their own unique experiences that allow them to show up. Just let people be. You focus on what you need to do.
Right.
And you be the best version of you and let everybody else run their program the way that they need to. But when we have boundaries are how you want to be treated, how you want people to interact with you. It's not all these rules about how everybody else should be governing themselves with everybody else. That's not your role to play. And if you think that somebody is being with you because you could tell everybody what you want to do, like, are you really engaging in a healthy relationship? Or are you just dealing with something because you could call all the shots? And what does that really say about you? Is that fulfilling? At all? And so I think just learning how to show up, taking care of yourself, being able to talk about things as they arise, because oftentimes we think like, okay, I don't want to create waves by addressing things. But if you don't, sooner or later things erupt. And now we're in total chaos because we let something that could have been simple, we addressed it in the beginning, or when it first, surfaced, we're able to get an understanding and iron that out. But now we have a multitude of things, and a person has no clue because you didn't bring it up, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And now it's like, well, I never knew that was a problem. And now you have all this resentment towards this person as if they were supposed to read your mind.
Yeah. No, you're saying a lot of really good things. And I do want to come back to that strict program. But first, let me just put a bow on interdependence. So I saw a post this week where someone was asking, like, hey, married people, tell us one thing that you really want to make sure we know about marriage. And Dr. Raquel Martin responded, if your partner is not making your life easier and vice versa, you shouldn't be married. And so to me, that was just a beautiful example of like this interdependence working well, where you're helping each other, you're making each other's lives easier. And a partner equals partner in real life. And so I just thought that was a really good example and reflection. All right, back to the strict program. So when we hear people say, they run a strict program, and you talked about boundaries. They're typically talking about romantic relationships, but I want to move into boundaries in family and understanding that it can be really complicated based on family dynamics, based on birth order, based on blended families, a lot of different reasons that setting a boundary, navigating a boundary, keeping a boundary with your family can be really, really complicated. Can you talk about what it looks like to set healthy boundaries with family and how to navigate emotions that come with outdated family patterns? We can start wherever we like.
You want to start, Hazel?
Sure. Yeah. Wow. There's so much to say about this. I'm going to work really hard because this is a big topic for me. I do want to just lead with there's the definition of boundaries. There's two definitions that I work with, but the one that feels most relevant to this conversation comes from Prentice Hemphill, and they say boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. And I really love that definition for this conversation around relationships and family dynamics, because for me, I often thought making a boundary meant I didn't love that person, and not having the boundary meant that I didn't love myself. So it was really difficult to sort of come to this. I also want to name, I'm not a scientist in any way, but I know there's physiology, there's biology, right? Like there's a tether. To if from the people that you were born from and spend a lot of time with. And then as to be an adult who once had to rely on these people, who I had to be extremely dependent, right? Now I'm moving into independence and hopefully interdependence if we're moving towards a healthy space. I think those shifts, a lot of our elders are not in the conversation with us. We're growing and changing, and yes, they are too. Their view often doesn't change, right? People will say, you're going to always be my baby. That's just the way it goes, right? So I just want to recognize that, being a caregiver, being a parent, like that's going to be your baby, right? And you understood them and grew them in a certain context. And so being able to let go and see them as fully autonomous, fully human, and adult is really, I can understand how it's difficult. So I want to make that as a disclaimer. And yet still, boundaries are essential. And for me, this has been a topic in our family. Again, I've had lots of conversations with my siblings, with my mother, about like, how do we want to govern ourselves? That's anything from like calling, how you call and how you answer the phone. So my sister, she'll call and like go just right into whatever. And I'm like, don't call me like that. Don't immediately on the phone. I'm like, I will hang up this phone. But the other definition that I work with boundaries is not so much about like what I'm going to ask of you when you do such and such. It's what I'm going to do when you do such and such. And so, hey, you can call me all you want with, immediately the fear or the challenge that you might feel like is acute. I'm going to govern myself in a way that brings us to a more stable conversation, right? That's maybe a boundary. I have boundaries around money, et cetera, et cetera. We made a boundary around gift giving. And now people honor that, which I really appreciate. But at some point when I was not honoring my boundary, whatever that was, I started to feel ickier and ickier each time. And my spirit got fed up with me betraying myself. And then it even got fed up with others who were okay with me betraying myself, or they didn't even know that was happening. Because to your point, Tamara, like they're just like, wait, what? You said it was cool. You ain't said nothing to me, right? And so being able to be honest about how much I didn't show up for myself. So how could they, right? I got tired of complaining about wanting to be and do something different than what I had been doing and being. And so at some level, I had to reprioritize my emotions and reprioritize my relationship with them and myself. And so I had weighed having my family feel good about me, weigh that higher than me feeling good about me, or even me feeling good about some of the decisions that they were making without judgment, right? And so, and the wild part for me is the more I practice my boundaries, the lighter my load gets, and the closer I get to my family, which is, I had not expected that, right? And so now and also the reality is some family members have decided to excuse themselves from my life due to my boundaries. And I also see that as a good thing. It's not without its challenges and sadness, of course, but in the long run, right, you don't want to necessarily have people around who are okay with you expressing the boundary, but not keeping it, but they know it exists, but they keep pushing it. And so for me, it's been really about holding the line. And then the last thing I want to say on this, because it runs deep with family, and this is, we're not monolithic. We are historical beings, a Black community, right? And there's a culture, there's a sometimes respectability politics that is born from the things I won't mention now, because that's not the kind of conversation. But there was a context where we literally did not belong to ourselves as a people. And the only thing that parents could do was watch. And I can't imagine, right? And so when there became an opportunity to belong to ourselves again, well, especially our children, you are mine. And I, again, can understand the historical context, the trauma that's really embedded in our histories, our culture, our DNA, that makes us, I'm just speaking generally, feel like our children cannot be themselves. What do you mean? You better give me a hug. You better give me your dog. Whatever the thing is, you belong to me, because for so long we didn't, right? And so I could really understand. And I think the invitation for us is to understand that we are in different times, though sometimes these days in 2026, it's feeling very familiar to history, but understanding the role culture and history plays in why sometimes it's hard to make those boundaries.
You said a lot.
Oh, stop saying that, because it's going to make me feel
you said a lot. No, I mean that in the best way. There's so many layers and levels and generational trauma, honestly, rooted in some of what you said. And it's always just a good point to reflect on those generational differences. It doesn't mean people get a pass, but at least you can come to something with a little bit of a different understanding when you really understand all the things that kind of came together to impact us, culture, people, in a very specific way. So Tamara, please build on to this with anything else on family boundaries.
So I come into boundaries very differently than a lot of people. I experience them differently because I grew up establishing boundaries before I even knew what boundaries were, right? So my dad's from military. My parents were young when they had me, 18 and 19. My dad was from the military. So I think oftentimes he tried to parent me from his military experience. I didn't sign up for the military. I didn't ask for that. That's not going to work for me. And I'm talking to me as a child. This is I've always communicated like you can't do that. And I was one who would write letters. Maybe, and that's what, led me into writing. But I would write letters. I was like, you did this and that was not okay. I need you to do this. It wasn't that, I was always very intentional about saying this didn't sit right with me, and if you do this instead, that can help. And my dad never addressed it directly, but it did stop me from doing it. I was like, I just need to communicate it, and it wasn't until I was an adult, my dad then became a pastor, and he had talked about he learned how to parent me through me. I had to inform him of how to parent me, and oftentimes it was not, I'm a Generation X raised by boomers. Boomers, they came out of their experiences like do as I say, not as I do, or whatever, right? And I couldn't deal with that aspect. I was always curious about the why of things, right? And because I questioned things or because I communicated how things made me feel, I was labeled as disrespectful or rebellious. And it's like, I don't have a problem with what you're stating. I just need to understand the why to make it make sense for me. That's just the curiosity in me. And so it often created some discomfort, even with the older generations. My grandparents or my aunts, they would do stuff. And to your point, like, you do this because as the adult, this is what we said. I was like, no, don't do that to me. That's not okay. I need space right now. You can't talk to me in that way. And I would come back to communicate, my apologies. And maybe it wasn't presented in the best way, but at the end of the day, my point was still the same. So just being able to recognize it's okay to be able to address how a situation made you feel, and just being able to communicate what you need differently, right? Oftentimes we default to complain about what's wrong. And that's all people hear about, what's wrong. And it shows up in our relationship dynamics, right? And so oftentimes if people knew something different to do, they would be doing something differently, right? But again, it goes back to, if you're not checking in with yourself to understand what you need, somebody else can't come up with the different behavior that you're asking for if you're not communicating it to them. But if you're checking in with yourself, why did this affect me this way? Right? And you really get to the root of that. Now I can go ask you for what I want instead of complaining. Because, it's like, you always do this or you didn't do this. Well, that's going to create some barriers in your relationship dynamics, because if that's constantly what you're doing is the complaint, right? A person is going to look at you or create distance from you because there's nothing that they do is ever enough, right? Or I'm just not going to deal with this person just because they always got issues, right? But if we can come in as like, hey, this has happened, right? And I would prefer you do this. That's very direct and that's very respectful, right? And a person has no bounds. I've never had issues by, people may not like the fact that I could be very strong-willed, but I can tell you everybody's always respected it, right? Because I'm always going to encounter you with respect. One of my biggest pet peeves is disrespect, right? And so if you meet me with disrespect, things can become disrespectful.
If you meet me with disrespect, things can become disrespectful. That's a t-shirt.
I like that a lot.
And I think I've always been targeted because I present in a way I could be, present in a professional demeanor. People can see me as a target. You can mistreat me, or it's just kind of to try me at any point. And I'm like, every now and then I always tell my mom I have to introduce myself a little bit. Like, okay, there are various parts of me that I could introduce to you, and you're not going to like that, right? And so when I say when we approach different things, sometimes, people can do things and it rubs us the wrong way. But I think the safest thing, well, I'll save that till later, because I think there's a later part of the conversation. But I think just being able to be in tune with yourself. You cannot communicate boundaries if you don't know yourself. Right? Yeah. Again, that's the difference between the rules and boundaries. Because rules is like, we're just trying to do all these things to keep everybody at bay. And it's like, if you just understand yourself, you can articulate what it is you want and need. And you'll find that people don't have a problem with respecting boundaries unless they don't have your best interests at heart. And if that's the case, then that's somebody you probably need to question, why are you engaging them at the capacity where they keep being able to disrespect or disregard your boundaries?
Yeah, and I think I heard it well said that if your boundary is you trying to address someone else's behavior, it's not a boundary. Your boundary should be about your own actions. And I know Hazel was mentioning this point earlier. So I can have a boundary that I don't talk on the phone after 10 p.m. because I want to get my rest. That's my boundary. It means you can call all you want to. I'm not trying to address whether you call or not. I'm just addressing that I'm not answering the phone because that's my way that I'm governing my own actions. But a lot of people are, to your point, out here saying they have a boundary on this and how you can't do this and you can't do that. And that's not a boundary. Yeah. Okay. I love this conversation. I love boundaries. I love attachment styles. Let's talk a little bit more about friendships. And when I think about friendships, I mean, again, I think since 2020, we've all at least known we should be more intentional in investing time with our friends. We've known and been a little clearer on the need to communicate our needs with our friends. I got a couple of good examples in terms of, like, I now have friends that, you call and something's going on and they'll say, hey, do you want to vent or are you looking for advice? And I think that's all things that we kind of were learning together in community, which I appreciate because sometimes I just want to vent. I'm not looking for advice. And thank you for asking. We've also been in some situations. I mean, I remember having a season of my life where I was just like, I'm leaning into conflict because I think maybe I just was a little conflict avoidant. And so trying to be more intentional and not go silent in friendships. So recognizing that we're all in different chapters of our lives. I mean, maybe this is something about this big age that I'm at. I have friends with young children. I have friends with children that are in college. I have friends with children that are their grandparents. Their children have children. I have friends who are executives in career. I have friends that are transitioning to brand new careers, starting entrepreneurships, their own businesses. I have friends who are recently divorced, people who have been married for the very first time, people who are still single. All of these things are happening in my friend dynamics and are part of the different life chapters that I'm in. And aging parents, taking care of young kids at the same time, people who are in the gym all day, don't care, prioritizing health, and people who don't call them unless you're going out to drink. So with all this going on around us, because it's a lot, what skills would you recommend we focus on to improve our friendships? We'll start with you, Hazel.
Okay. I'm going to work real hard to keep it short. I think this is a soft skill, but you got to put the hard work in, is to not take them for granted. I think this happened a lot in my 20s and a lot of my, specifically like my girlfriends and and myself included, like when we start dating, we just kick our friends to the curb because we just know they're going to be there. We'll be, maybe things don't go well. And be like, hey, Meyer, I'm sorry, I kicked you to the curb. That's one of my besties right there. But just to not take them for granted. And I'm very fortunate. I have the best friends in the world. Everybody can say that, but mine's actually true. I have the best friends in the world. And for me, the thing that's been helpful is to just make life happen with them in ways that are natural. Yes, there's like, do the girls trip and, go do the specific activity and have the brunch. And those things always feel good to me. And some of the best ones is like, hey, I just like need a moment. Can I come visit you? Like I literally in December was just having a hard time. And so I went and visited my other bestie, Katie, in Minneapolis and just sat on the couch for 4 days. And like, it was just beautiful. And it just like happened naturally. Let's cook together. Let's go to Costco together. Like just like make life happen. And for me, friendship isn't always a place where like I need to entertain. It's entertaining. We entertain each other and have a good time. But I think being able to just be present in the friendships. And again, I think I've learned to let love in because of my friends. My friends love me down. They love me so well. And I've been able to shift my, back to our attachment. So I've been able to shift and be more secure in my attachment. I trust the people around me who love me and care for me. And then like on a practical thing, I have read the 4 Agreements, like 1,000 times. It's by Don Miguel Ruiz. Yeah, they're on the screen. I've read it 1,000 times, and the 4 agreements are to be impeccable with your word. And again, that really can be reflected with yourself. Like, who am I? And can I hold the boundary? Can I, be in integrity and alignment with who I say that I am and what I'm going to be up to? The second is to not take anything personally. This is actually really important in friendships. To your point, Janet, like people's lives are full. My friend told me this in December or January. After my GMA passed, it's all I can think of. It's like my whole personality, for this time. I'm like, why isn't such and such person calling me and, asking me if I'm okay? And she was like, well, because it's not happening to them. They got other things going on, right? And so just remembering, like, it's not personal. Like, it is not personal. That's the biggest one I can share. And it's sort of attached to that, the third agreement is to not make assumptions. Ask more questions. Be curious. Like, your friends have rich lives and have a lot going on. And sometimes we're not always sharing it with each other just because it's just the nitty gritty of life, right? I might share with my wife first and foremost because that's my wife. And then it's like, oh, right, I need to tell my friends like this thing is happening, right? And maybe like at brunch 6 weeks from now, I'm like, hey, by the way, this thing happened, right? It's just the way it goes. And then the last agreement is always do your best. I feel like we really are just trying. We're humans on this floating rock, paying rent, paying to drink a natural resource, water. And none of it really makes a lot of sense. So we're all doing our best with what we got at this time. And so remembering those and bringing that into my life has been really helpful to improve my friendships. And then the last thing is letting them support me. And not just when I have no choice. I've had, surgeries where I literally physically can't move and I have to rely on people, and that's fine. But allowing them to help me when that isn't the case, when it isn't sort of a dire, and that has enriched my life greatly. And I feel the friendships growing deeper because of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Don't wait till you don't have a choice. Good. Tamara, what would you like to add?
That is all great, Hazel. And I also want to add to it is just being able to, again, it goes back to knowing yourself, right? If you could recognize your life exists with your own circumstances and challenges, you understand that you need people to have understanding for you and what you have going through, right? And so if you could recognize that for yourself, you could extend grace to others. Right. But if you're not paying attention to that for you, right, you have these unreasonable expectations of other people. You expect them to just drop everything to be there for you because you have something going on. It doesn't mean that they can't be there for you, that they don't care about what's going on for you, but they don't have the capacity to do anything beyond what their current circumstances are having. Right. And so that's challenging to come to terms with accepting that. Right. But that's just a harsh reality about being a human. And so are they able to reserve time for you later when it is more manageable for them, right? You want to look at people's effort and not just base it off of a current season, right? Just look at the context of that dynamic, those relationships, right? How have they shown up? How have you shown up for each other throughout these various stages that y'all have been together? So if it has been solid 90% of the time, and this one particular time there are changes, give people grace. And like to your point, Hazel, Ask questions. Come in from a point of curiosity. Hey, I noticed X, Y, Z. Is everything going on? What's going on, right? Because you don't know what cross they're bearing, and so sometimes they just need people to see them.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if we are making everything about us, nobody wants to deal with it. It's like, I'm not even thinking about you. And so if you can give people space to know, like, we are all just human and doing the best we can at every stage of our journey, then we could just give grace and figure out, how do you need me to step up for you, or is there anything that I could do for you? Because sometimes that's just giving people space. Right? Because some people are drawn and they're being overextended because they have to show up for all of these responsibilities that affect their livelihood, that affect their family dynamics. They don't have room to do the other things, right? It doesn't mean your relationship with them is any less. That means they just don't have the space to do that right now. Right now, this is all that they can do, and they don't have the resources to extend anywhere else. Right. Mm-hmm. And so if you can understand that, then maybe you can show up for them, and that develops the connection that you're searching for in the first place. Right. So if you focus on how you can pour in as well as receive, that's what makes, healthy relationships in those friendships. And so if you're truly friends, you should be able to talk about things versus blaming somebody or cutting people off. We're in a stage where everybody's good with their cutoff.
Right.
Yeah. I'm good with their cutoff, but what does that really serve? Because before you know it, you turn around and you're an island because you every significant lifeline to you off, and now you're trying to figure out how you got there. Well, you got to go back and look at some of your actions that got you here, right? Well, because go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I'm hearing a very common theme for you, and I'm a consultant. I'm always wearing a consultant hat. You may want to get the domain name. It ain't all about you, because it's very core to the theme.
I hear it.
Make sure we're clear about it. Ain't all about us. Now, for us, it's all about us, and in our world. And that's fine. You can be the main character of your story, but at the same time, when you're interacting with the rest of this world, people aren't even thinking about you a lot of the time, to your point. And so I think that is always good advice for us to remember. We have a couple of minutes left. I can't believe that went by so quickly. There are a couple of things I want to make sure we do really, really quickly. If you have one tip, and I mean round robin, quick fire tip that you want to make sure people take with them before we wrap up, please share it. Let me start with you, Hazel.
I mean, I've said a lot, but the thing that is so important is get you good mentors, get you a board of directors, whoever. I have the best of everything. I have the best mentor. Paula Dermody, she out there. I absolutely would not be where and who I am without her and the mentorship. Get you people who just won't big you up. They have that will push you, get you good mentors. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And Tam?
Definitely agree. And I just lost it just that quickly. But, just being honest with yourself, right? Because when you're honest with yourself, you're able to deal with your flaws, right? You're able to, address those things to know the opportunities where you can grow from. And I think when you're honest with yourself, you can receive feedback, whether it's kind or not, where you see it as kind or not, right? Even though those hard truths, they're meant to help us. I remember somebody used the analogy, like, difficult people are like sandpaper. They're intended to polish you.
That's good.
And so if you could deal with the harshness and know not everything is out here to destroy you, you grow from it. These are things that you can work on to show up for yourself better, and you show up in your relationship dynamics a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Okay. Thank you so much, both of you. I do also want to make sure to remind people, if you want to try some of these tips in real life, we have an opportunity on April 2nd at 5 p.m. for a in-person, in real life. It's called Connection Over Perfection. Go to thegoodlounge.org/B, the letter N, the letter B. It's on the bottom of the screen here. And you can grab a ticket. We'll be at Fairfax, and we'll have Dr. Elizabeth Whittington walking us through tips for how we can connect. We'll have networking bingo. We'll have DJ Bloom. It's going to be a great time. We'll have coffee. We'll have mocktails. We'll have cocktails. We'll have many things that help us connect human to human. And we'll just talk about tips to do that without the distraction of technology. So if you don't have a ticket and you are in Houston, Texas, or you're coming to Houston, Texas, I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you both for being a part of this great conversation on healing relationship patterns. I hope our audience got some good takeaways. I did share some resources in the comments in the chat based on different things we've talked about. And we're just always excited to bring these discussions to you. Please follow us on Instagram at Instagram is thegoodlounge.org, or follow us on YouTube at thegoodlounge.org. You can go to thegoodlounge.org for the YouTube page as well. We made it, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. I could talk to both of you for another hour on this topic, and I look forward to having you back either at something in person or on a future webinar. Have a great rest of your day.
Love you, Michael. I saw her say hi. Love you back, boo.